The stars looked different through the bridge windows of the exploration ship Horizon's Edge. Captain Jake Morrison had been staring at them for 3 hours now, watching Jupiter's moons drift slowly past as his crew ran their usual deep space scans. Nothing ever happened out here in the outer system. Earth Command had sent them to look for asteroids and maybe some ice to mine, but mostly Jake knew they were just showing off humanity's first real interstellar ship to anyone who might be watching. "Captain, we've got something weird on the sensors," called out Lieutenant Amy Chen from her station. Her voice had that edge it got when she found something that didn't belong. Jake turned away from the window and walked over to look at her screen. "What kind of weird?" "Big weird. Something just dropped out of hyperspace near the Jupiter EO transit zone. It's not broadcasting any signals we recognize, and it's definitely not one of ours." The bridge went quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. Humanity had been alone in space for as long as they could remember. They had faster-than-light travel for only 5 years now, and they had never found any sign that other intelligent life existed. Jake felt his heart speed up as he looked at the readings. "Size and configuration?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "About twice our length, sir. The design is nothing like anything in our database. And Captain..." Amy paused and looked up at him. "It's badly damaged. I'm reading hull breaches and what looks like weapons fire." Jake made his decision quickly. "Set course for intercept. All hands to battle stations, but keep weapons offline. Send a message to Earth Command and let them know we might have first contact." The next hour felt like the longest in Jake's life. As they got closer to the alien ship, the damage became more obvious. Huge holes had been burned through its hull, and pieces of metal floated around it like a small asteroid field. Whatever had attacked this ship had been serious about destroying it. "Captain, we're getting a transmission," reported Communications Officer Bill Torres. "It's coming through our translation computers, but the signal is very weak." "Put it through." Voice came over the speakers, speaking words that sounded almost human but with a strange accent. "Unknown vessel, please respond. This is Navigator Veltar of the Zephyrian Confederation. We are in desperate need of assistance." Jake looked around at his crew. They all stared back at him with wide eyes. This was really happening. "Open a channel," he said. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship Horizon's Edge. We read you, Navigator Veltar. What is your situation?" "Captain Morrison, we thank the cosmic forces that brought you to us. Our ship is dying, and our people are facing complete destruction. We have traveled many light years to find someone who might help us." 20 minutes later, Jake found himself in the ship's main meeting room, staring at something that looked like a tall, thin human with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Navigator Veltar had come aboard with 2 other Zephyrians, and they all had the same peaceful, almost sad look about them. "Captain Morrison," Veltar said in his soft voice, "we must tell you a terrible story. Our people, the Zephyrian Confederation, rule 12 star systems in what you would call the Andromeda sector. For thousands of years, we have lived in peace, building our worlds through trade and science. We have no weapons, no armies. We believe that all intelligent life in the galaxy shared our desire for harmony." Veltar activated a small device that projected images into the air above the table. Jake watched as beautiful worlds with crystal cities appeared before him. The Zephyrians lived in places that looked like paradise, with flowing water and plants everywhere. "But 6 months ago they came," Veltar continued. His voice became even sadder. "The Krovar Empire. They are a species of reptilian warriors who live only to conquer and destroy. They have already taken half of our worlds." The images changed, to show something that made Jake's stomach turn. Massive dark ships hung over burning cities. Explosions lit up the sky as buildings fell. People ran in terror through streets filled with smoke. "They do not want our surrender," said one of the other Zephyrians, a female named Kiraseth. "They want only our complete destruction. They burn our worlds to ash and leave nothing alive behind them." Jake watched the horror show playing out. In the holographic display, entire planets reduced to glowing rocks, refugee ships being hunted down and destroyed, children screaming as they ran from things that looked like giant armored lizards. How many of your people have died? Asked Dr. Susan Wright, the ship's medical officer. Billions, Veltar replied simply. Entire worlds of billions of souls gone forever, and they will not stop until every Zephyrian in the galaxy is dead. Jake leaned forward in his chair. Why are you telling us this? We're just one ship from a world you've never heard of. Veltar's large eyes focused on him with what looked like desperate hope. Because we have been monitoring your radio signals for many years, we know that your people understand warfare in ways that we do not. You have fought great battles and survived terrible conflicts. You know how to think like warriors. You want us to fight for you? Jake asked. We are prepared to offer you everything. We have, said Kiraseth. All of our technology, all of our knowledge, all of our wealth. Faster-than-light drives that make yours look like children's toys. Weapons that can destroy entire fleets. Medical science that could extend your lives by centuries. All of this and more, if you will help us survive. Jake felt his mind racing. The technology they were offering could change everything for humanity. They could explore the galaxy, cure diseases, solve energy problems. But they were also asking him to commit his species to a war against an enemy they knew nothing about. I need to contact my government, he said finally. This isn't a decision I can make alone. 3 days later, Jake stood in the communications room watching Admiral Lisa Kane and President Rick Carter appear on the big screen. Behind them sat the entire Earth Defense Council, all looking as shocked as Jake had felt when he first saw the alien ship. Captain Morrison, said President Carter, these Zephyrians have made quite an impression on us. Their technology demonstrations have been remarkable. Admiral Kane nodded. The weapon systems they've shown us are beyond anything we thought possible. And their medical technology. She paused. Captain, they cured cancer in a laboratory. Mouse in 3 minutes. Jake looked through the window at the Zephyrian ship still floating nearby with its battle damage. Sir, what are your orders? The Council has voted, Carter said. We're authorizing a full military response. Admiral Kane will lead a fleet to Zephyrian space within the month. We're going to show these Krovar that they picked the wrong fight. And Captain, added Admiral Kane, you did good work out there. When we reach Zephyrian space, you'll be my second in command. Jake felt a mix of excitement and worry as he signed off the communication. Humanity was about to enter its first galactic war, fighting for a peaceful species against brutal conquerors. They would gain incredible technology and establish themselves as a major power in the galaxy. He had no idea that the Zephyrians had been very careful about which parts of the truth they shared, or that the real enemy they would face would turn out to be much closer than anyone thought. 6 weeks later, Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance watching the blue and green world of Ethros grow larger on the main screen. The Zephyrian homeworld looked as peaceful as Navigator Veltar had promised, with its crystal cities gleaming in the light of 2 suns. Behind her flagship, 43 other Earth ships moved in perfect formation through space. Admiral, we're receiving docking instructions from the Zephyrian orbital stations, reported Lieutenant Mary Davis from the communications station. Follow their lead, Kane replied. She turned to Captain Jake Morrison, who stood beside her command chair. What do you think of their space defenses? Jake studied the tactical display showing dozens of Zephyrian platforms around the planet. They look impressive, but something feels wrong. Those weapons platforms are positioned to defend against attacks from outside the system, but there are huge gaps in their coverage. Maybe they just never expected to be attacked, suggested Colonel Steve Wright, who had joined them on the bridge. Kane nodded, but she had the same feeling as Jake. Something about the Zephyrian military setup didn't match what she expected, from a species that had been fighting a war for 6 months. 3 hours later, Kane found herself in a massive crystal building that served as the Zephyrian military command center. The place buzzed with activity as hundreds of pale blue aliens worked at strange computers and holographic displays. General Thainvel, the Zephyrian military leader, greeted her with what seemed like genuine relief. Admiral Kane, your arrival gives us new hope, he said in his soft voice. The Krovar have taken 3 more systems while we waited for your fleet to arrive. Soon they will reach our core worlds. Kane studied the tactical map that floated in the air between them. Red markers showed Krovar positions throughout what had once been Zephyrian space. General, I need detailed information about Krovar tactics and capabilities before we can plan any operations. Of course, Thanevel replied. We have prepared complete files for your intelligence officers. The Krovar are brutal but predictable. They use overwhelming force and show no mercy to civilians. Lieutenant Colonel Danny Price, Kane's intelligence chief, spent the next 2 days going through Zephyrian data about their enemy. What he found puzzled him. The Krovar seemed to use advanced tactics and careful planning, not the simple brute force approach the Zephyrians described. Their attack patterns showed intelligence and strategic thinking. Admiral, Price reported during their first staff meeting, something doesn't add up. The Krovar movements look like they're trying to minimize civilian casualties, not maximize them. And they're targeting very specific installations. What kind of installations? Asked Major Kate Sullivan, who commanded the Human Special Forces units. Manufacturing centers, communication hubs, and what the Zephyrians call administrative facilities. But they're avoiding population centers and agricultural areas, Kane frowned. That doesn't sound like the behavior of species bent on genocide. No, ma'am, it doesn't, Price agreed. Their first joint operation with Zephyrian forces came a week later. Intelligence reported a Krovar supply depot in an asteroid, field 3 light-years away. Kane decided it would be a good chance to see both sides in action while hitting a relatively soft target. Captain Tommy Bradley led a marine assault force aboard fast attack ships, with Zephyrian vessels providing support. The plan was simple: disable the depot's defenses, capture supplies, and withdraw before Krovar reinforcements could arrive. Everything went wrong from the start. Admiral, the Zephyrian ships are falling back, reported Bradley over the radio, as his Marines fought their way through the asteroid field. They're leaving us exposed to enemy fire. Kane watched the tactical display in horror, as Zephyrian vessels suddenly broke formation and retreated, abandoning the human forces in the middle of the battle. Order all human ships to withdraw immediately, she commanded. Bradley's voice came through with the sound of explosions in the background. Ma'am, we can't pull back yet. We've got wounded Marines who need extraction. What happened next shocked everyone monitoring the battle. Krovar ships that had been firing on the human forces suddenly stopped shooting and began broadcasting on emergency frequencies. Their message, translated by computer, was simple. Human vessels, evacuate your wounded. We will provide safe passage. The Krovar not only allowed the humans to retreat, they actually helped rescue 3 Marines whose ship had been disabled. Even more surprising, Kane watched Krovar vessels move to protect a group of Zephyrian civilian transports that were trying to evacuate the area. Admiral, Bradley reported after returning to the fleet, I need to speak with you privately. There's something very wrong here. In Kane's ready room, Bradley described what he had seen during the battle. Ma'am, the Krovar weren't just protecting their own people. They were actively shielding Zephyrian civilians from Zephyrian military vessels. I saw a Krovar destroyer place itself between a refugee transport and what looked like Zephyrian weapons fire. Kane felt a cold sensation in her stomach. Are you certain about this, Captain? Yes, ma'am. And there's more. The Krovar soldiers we encountered weren't the savage reptiles the Zephyrians described. They fought hard, but they followed rules of engagement. They didn't execute prisoners, and they provided medical aid to our wounded. Dr. Helen Moore had been working around the clock in her laboratory, trying to decode intercepted Krovar communications. She was a brilliant linguist who had learned the Zephyrian language in just 2 weeks. Now she was making progress with the Krovar signals, and what she found made her rush to find Admiral Kane. Admiral, you need to see this, Moore said, bursting into Kane's office with a tablet computer. I've been translating Krovar military communications, and they're not talking like conquerors. Kane took the tablet and read the translated messages. They were reports from Krovar field commanders to their superiors, but the content was nothing like what she expected. Liberation of Facility 7 complete. found 2,847 workers in labor camps, medical teams treating malnutrition and work injuries. Recommend immediate relocation to safe worlds. Zephyrian Administrative Center destroyed. Recovered records showing forced tribute collections from client species. Evidence forwarded to War Command for tribunal proceedings. Civilian evacuation. Proceeding ahead of schedule. Zephyrian military attempting to prevent refugee departures. Request permission to engage. Kane read through dozens of similar messages, each one painting a picture that was the complete opposite of what the Zephyrians had told them. Dr. Moore, are you certain these translations are accurate? I've checked them multiple times, Admiral. The Krovar aren't conquerors, they're liberators, and the people they're liberating aren't being freed from Krovar occupation. Moore paused and looked directly at Kane. They're being freed from Zephyrian control. That evening, Kane called an emergency meeting of all senior human officers. In the secure conference room aboard the Defiance, she laid out what they had discovered. The room remained silent as she explained the intercepted communications, the strange Krovar behavior during the battle, and the inconsistencies in Zephyrian accounts of the war. So what are you saying, Admiral? Asked Colonel Wright. I'm saying we may have been lied to, Kane replied. The Zephyrians presented themselves as peaceful victims of aggression, but the evidence suggests something very different. Major Sullivan leaned forward in her chair. Are we talking about a civil war instead of a war of conquest? Worse than that, said Dr. Moore. Based on what I'm seeing in these communications, the Krovar represent dozens of different species. They're not an empire. They're a coalition of former Zephyrian subject worlds. Subject worlds? Asked Captain Morrison. Kane nodded grimly. Slaves, Jake. The Krovar coalition appears to be a slave rebellion and we're fighting on the wrong side. Lieutenant Colonel Price spoke up from the end of the table. Admiral, there's something else. I've been analyzing Zephyrian troop movements and they're not deploying like a species fighting for survival. They're deploying like a species trying to maintain control over territory and resources. What's our legal position here? Asked Colonel Wright. Kane looked around the table at her officers. Technically, we have a signed agreement with the Zephyrian government to provide military assistance. But if they obtain that agreement through deliberate deception about the nature of the conflict, then we're not bound by it, finished Morrison. The question is, what do we do now? Kane said. We're 43 ships deep in hostile space surrounded by two sides that both have reasons not to trust us. Major Sullivan stood up. Admiral, I request permission to conduct reconnaissance missions to verify our intelligence. If the Krovar really are fighting to free enslaved populations, we need to know for certain. Kane considered this. Approved. Major, but be extremely careful. We're walking a very thin line here. As the meeting ended and officers filed out, Jake Morrison remained behind. Lisa, he said quietly. What happens if we find out the Zephyrians have been lying to us about everything? Kane stared out the window at the peaceful-looking planet below them. Then we do what humans have always done when we discover someone is enslaving innocent people, Jake. We stop them. Major Kate Sullivan crouched behind a broken wall, watching through her binoculars as Zephyrian soldiers herded a group of refugees toward a cluster of transport ships. What she saw made her blood run cold. These weren't evacuation ships. They were cargo vessels with barred windows and armed guards. Davis, are you getting this on recording? She whispered into her radio. Every second of it, Major, replied Sergeant Bob Davis, her communications specialist. Those refugees don't look like they're being rescued. Sullivan had been conducting reconnaissance missions for 2 weeks now, and each one revealed more disturbing evidence. The Zephyrians weren't protecting their civilian population. They were controlling them, moving them around like property, and anyone who resisted disappeared into those cargo ships. Movement on the east side, reported Corporal Lisa Chen from her sniper position. Looks like Krovar patrol ships approaching. Sullivan watched as 3 small Krovar vessels appeared over the ridge. Instead of attacking the refugee column, they broadcast messages in multiple languages. Her translation device picked up the words, "Civilians, please move to safe areas. We will protect you from harm." What happened next shocked her. The Zephyrian guards immediately began shooting at the refugees, trying to drive them back toward the cargo ships. The Krovar vessels responded by placing themselves between the guards, and the fleeing civilians using their own ships as shields. "My God," whispered Davis. "The Zephyrians are shooting their own people." Sullivan activated her emergency communicator. "Admiral Kane, this is Sullivan. You need to hear this report immediately." 40 minutes later, Sullivan stood in Admiral Kane's ready room aboard the Defiance, showing her recordings to Kane, Morrison, and Dr. Moore. The footage spoke for itself. Zephyrian military forces were actively preventing their own civilians from escaping, while Krovar ships risked themselves to protect innocent people. "This is the 5th site where we've observed this pattern," Sullivan reported. "The Zephyrians are treating their civilian population like prisoners, not citizens." Dr. Moore looked up from her tablet. "It matches what I'm finding in the historical records they gave us. I've been analyzing their database, and there are huge gaps in their cultural and technological development. It's as if they acquired advanced technology very quickly without developing it themselves." "What does that suggest?" asked Morrison. "That they stole it," Kane said grimly, "or extorted it from other species." The discussion was interrupted by an urgent message from Lieutenant Colonel Price. "Admiral, we've intercepted a priority Zephyrian communication. Navigator Veltar has just authorized the use of an orbital bombardment weapon against what they're calling a terrorist stronghold." Kane felt her heart sink. "Where?" Grid reference 7 Alpha 9. "It's a refugee camp, ma'am. Krovar intelligence indicates there are over 3,000 civilians there, including children." Kane made her decision in seconds. "All ships, emergency alert. Prepare to intercept that bombardment." But they were too late. By the time human ships reached the coordinates, the Zephyrian orbital weapon had already fired. The refugee camp was a smoking crater filled with the bodies of families who had been trying to escape the war. Men, women, and children lay scattered across the blasted ground, their only crime being born into species that the Zephyrians considered property. Major Sullivan walked through the destruction with her medical team, trying to find survivors. The sight of dead children, some still clutching toys or family photos, triggered something deep and primal in her mind. These weren't casualties of war. This was murder. "Major," called out Medic Tony Rodriguez from beside a collapsed shelter. "I've got a survivor here." Sullivan rushed over to find a young creature that looked like a cross between a human child and a cat, badly burned but still breathing. As Rodriguez worked to treat its injuries, the child spoke in broken English. "Please," it whispered, "don't let the blue people find me. They hurt my family. They make us work in the dark places." Sullivan knelt beside the child and gently took its hand. "You're safe now. The blue people won't hurt you anymore." Later that evening, Sullivan contacted Admiral Kane with a simple message. "Ma'am, we need to have a serious conversation about our mission here." The next morning, Jake Morrison did something that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. He opened a direct communication channel to the Krovar fleet and requested a meeting with their commander. War Commander Thexka appeared on the view screen as a tall, powerful reptilian creature with intelligent green eyes and scarred armor. His appearance was intimidating, but his voice was calm and reasonable. "Captain Morrison of Earth," Thexka said, "I admit surprise at your communication. Your people fight alongside the slavers. Why do you contact us now?" Morrison chose his words carefully. "Because we're beginning to think we've been fighting for the wrong side, Commander. We need to know the truth about this war." Thexka studied Morrison for a long moment. "The truth, human? The truth is that your people were deceived, just as dozens of other species were deceived over the centuries. The Zephyrians are not the peaceful traders they pretend to be." Over the next hour, Thexka provided Morrison with evidence that painted a horrifying picture. The Zephyrian Confederation was built on slavery and exploitation. For over 1,000 years they had contacted developing species, offered them technology and trade agreements, then gradually turned them into dependent client states. "They are parasites," Thexka explained. "They appear harmless and helpful, but they slowly drain the life from every species they encounter. My own people were enslaved for 300 years before we developed the strength to fight back. Morrison watched recordings that showed massive labor camps hidden throughout Zephyrian space. Millions of beings from dozens of different species worked in dangerous conditions, mining rare elements and manufacturing technology. Children were born into slavery and died without ever seeing freedom. "How many species are involved in your coalition?" Morrison asked. 47 different peoples from 16 star systems, all former slaves of the Confederation. We fight not for conquest, but for liberation. Dr. Moore made the final breakthrough that same day. Deep in the Zephyrian database, she found files that had been poorly hidden behind layers of security. What she discovered made her rush immediately to Admiral Kane. "Admiral, I know why the Zephyrians are so desperate to maintain their empire," she said, her hands shaking as she activated her tablet. "They're a dying species. Their peaceful appearance isn't natural. It's the result of genetic modification designed to make them seem harmless to other species." Kane studied the biological data on the screen. "What are you saying, Doctor?" "They're parasites, both literally and figuratively. Their original form was completely different. They require genetic material from other species to prevent their own extinction. That's why they can't let their slave species go free. Without them, the Zephyrians will die out within a generation." That evening, Admiral Kane convened an emergency meeting of all human commanders. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The Zephyrians had lied about everything. They weren't victims of aggression. They were the aggressors, fighting to maintain a slave empire that spanned multiple star systems. "The question before us is simple," Kane said to the assembled officers. "Do we honor our agreement with a government that obtained it through deception, or do we stand with the innocent people they're enslaving?" Colonel Wright spoke first. "Admiral, as far as I'm concerned, our agreement was void the moment they lied to us about the nature of this conflict." Major Sullivan nodded. "I've seen what they do to children, ma'am. We can't be part of that." Captain Morrison leaned forward. "There's another consideration. If we simply withdraw, the Krovar coalition might not survive. They're outgunned and outnumbered. Without our help, the Zephyrians could crush the rebellion and go back to enslaving billions of people." Kane looked around the table at her officers. "Are you suggesting we switch sides?" "I'm suggesting we do what's right," Morrison replied. "We came here to fight against an evil empire that was destroying innocent people. We just had the wrong target." Dr. Moore cleared her throat. "There's one more thing you need to know. I found evidence that the Zephyrians have a final solution planned. If they can't maintain control over their slave species, they're prepared to exterminate them all, rather than allow them to be free." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zephyrians would rather commit genocide than lose their empire. "How long do we have?" asked Kane. "According to their classified files, they're preparing to activate what they call the Purification Protocol within days. It will simultaneously destroy every non-Zephyrian population center in their territory." Kane stood up slowly. "Gentlemen, ladies, it appears we have a choice to make. We can honor our agreement with liars and slavers, or we can prevent the greatest genocide in galactic history." The vote was unanimous. Humanity would not stand by and watch innocent people die. But more than that, they would use every weapon and every advantage they possessed to make sure the Zephyrians never again had the power to enslave anyone. "Colonel Wright," Kane said, "begin planning Operation Nightmare. We're going to show the Zephyrians exactly what happens when you lie to humanity about matters of life and death."
Oh.
Admiral Lisa Kane stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching as 43 human warships moved into attack formation around the Zephyrian homeworld. Below them, the crystal cities that had once seemed so beautiful now looked like the monuments to slavery that they truly were. Every gleaming spire had been built with the blood and sweat of enslaved peoples from across the galaxy. "Admiral, we're receiving a communication from Navigator Veltar," reported Lieutenant Mary Davis. "He's demanding to know why we've moved into hostile positions." Kane smiled coldly. "Put him through." Veltar's pale blue face appeared on the main screen, his large dark eyes filled with confusion and growing fear. "Admiral Kane, what is the meaning of this? We are your allies. Why do your ships threaten our world? Because we know the truth, Veltar, Kane replied, her voice hard as steel. We know about the slave camps. We know about the labor colonies. We know you've been lying to us from the moment we met. The Zephyrian's peaceful mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something ugly underneath. I don't know what propaganda the Krovar terrorists have fed you, but you must not believe their lies. We've seen the evidence with our own eyes, Kane said. We've rescued survivors from your orbital bombardment of refugee camps. We've watched you shoot your own civilians to prevent them from escaping. The lies stop now. Veltar's image flickered as he cut the communication. Within minutes, Kane's tactical display lit up with warnings as Zephyrian defense platforms powered up their weapons and began targeting human ships. All ships, this is Admiral Kane, she broadcast to her fleet. Operation Nightmare is now active. You have your targets. Remember, we're here to liberate the enslaved, not to conquer. Show no mercy to slavers, but protect all civilian populations. What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a demonstration of why Earth's long history of warfare had produced the most dangerous military force the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Tommy Bradley led the first wave of attacks against Zephyrian orbital platforms. His Marines had spent weeks studying captured Zephyrian technology, learning how their weapons worked and how to turn them against their creators. The human ships moved with precision and deadly efficiency, their tactics adapted from centuries of human conflict. Orbital Platform 7 neutralized, Bradley reported over the radio. No civilian casualties. Moving to next target. Meanwhile, Major Kate Sullivan's Special Forces unit struck at ground targets across the planet. They didn't just destroy Zephyrian military installations. They captured them, forcing Zephyrian commanders to broadcast confessions of their crimes before the executions that followed. This is General Thainville, came one such broadcast that went out across the entire planet. I confess to the enslavement of 47 species and the murder of billions of innocent beings. I die knowing that justice has finally come for my people. The psychological impact was devastating. Zephyrian military units began surrendering without a fight as word spread that the humans were not just defeating them, but systematically dismantling their entire command structure. Jake Morrison, now commanding a battle group of 12 ships, coordinated with War Commander Thexka to strike at Zephyrian fleets throughout their territory. The Krovar leader had initially been suspicious of human intentions, but he quickly learned to trust their commitment to justice. Captain Morrison, Thexka communicated during one joint operation, "Your people fight with a fury I have never seen. It is as if you take the suffering of strangers as a personal insult." "We do," Morrison replied simply. "That's what makes us human." Dr. Helen Moore made a discovery that changed everything. Deep in the Zephyrian central computer system, she found the activation codes for the purification protocol, the plan to exterminate all non-Zephyrian life in their territory. "Admiral," she reported urgently, "they're going to activate it in 6 hours. The protocol will simultaneously destroy every slave colony, every labor camp, every world where non-Zephyrians live. We're talking about the deaths of 20 billion innocent people." Kane felt ice form in her veins. "Can you stop it?" "Not from here. The activation system is distributed across 12 different command centers in 12 different star systems. They'd all have to be destroyed or captured simultaneously." Kane looked at the tactical display showing the locations of the command centers. They were spread across hundreds of light years, each one heavily defended. A conventional assault would take weeks and they had only hours. "Colonel Wright," she called to her ground forces commander, "I need 12 simultaneous precision strikes on fortified positions across multiple star systems. Can it be done?" Wright studied the data for exactly 30 seconds. "Yes, ma'am, but it will require splitting our forces and hitting all targets at exactly the same time. 1 minute late on any target and billions die. Then we don't have the luxury of being late." What happened next became known throughout the galaxy as the Hour of Liberation. Human forces, working with Krovar Coalition, ships launched coordinated attacks across 12 star systems simultaneously. Each strike team had exactly 1 hour to fight their way through heavy defenses, capture or destroy a command center, and prevent the activation of genocide protocols. On Theta Station, Captain Bradley's Marines fought through automated defense systems and Zephyrian elite guards to reach the command center with only minutes to spare. On Kepler 7, Major Sullivan's Special Forces infiltrated the facility by disguising themselves as Zephyrian technicians and struck from within. Command Center Alpha secured, came the first report. Command Center Beta neutralized, followed seconds later. One by one, the reports came in as human forces accomplished what should have been impossible. They were fighting on 12 different battlefields simultaneously, against an enemy that had centuries of technological advancement. And they were winning. The final command center was the most heavily defended, located on a fortress world at the edge of Zephyrian space. Jake Morrison led the assault personally, his ships fighting through wave after wave of automated defenders. "Morrison to all units," he broadcast as his Marines stormed the final facility. "We're inside the command center, 60 seconds to deadline." Lieutenant Amy Chen worked frantically at the alien control systems, using codes that Dr. Moore had extracted from captured databases. With 15 seconds remaining, she looked up at Morrison with sweat pouring down her face. "Sir, the protocol is locked out. The genocide has been prevented. Across 12 star systems, 20 billion enslaved beings suddenly found themselves free. Labor camps opened their gates. Transport ships that had been carrying refugees to execution chambers instead delivered them to safety. Children who had never known anything but slavery stepped into sunlight for the first time in their lives. The Zephyrian Confederation ceased to exist as a political entity within 72 hours. Their military was destroyed, their leadership dead or captured, and their technology shared freely among the species they had enslaved for centuries. War Commander Thexka met with Admiral Kane aboard the Defiance a week later to discuss the future of the liberated systems. "Admiral Kane," he said, "my people and the other freed species owe humanity a debt that can never be repaid. You risked everything to save people you had never met." Kane shook her head. "We didn't do it for gratitude, Commander. We did it because it was right." "Even so," Thexka continued, "the freed peoples have voted to establish the Galactic Liberation Alliance with Earth as a founding member. We hope that together, we can ensure that no species ever again faces the choice between slavery and extinction." Jaker Morrison, now promoted to Admiral, established the first human colony outside Earth's solar system on a world gifted by grateful former slaves. He named it Haven, and it became the headquarters for humanity's new role as the galaxy's protectors. The final message that went out across known space was broadcast in over 1,000 languages. "This is Earth. We received your call for salvation and answered it. But remember, we are not your saviors. We are your worst nightmare if you prey on the innocent, and your strongest shield if you choose to live free. Choose wisely." The Zephyrians had called for a savior and received Earth's nightmare instead. But for the billions of beings they had enslaved, that nightmare had turned out to be exactly the salvation they needed. And across the galaxy, other species now knew that humanity stood ready to defend those who could not defend themselves, no matter the cost.